The plants that we find before the lodgepole pine arrival are basically, it's a tundra assemblage, and some of these are plants that people could have used for food, such as crowberries, which produce black edible berries, bunchberries. There are a lot of plants that are typical of tundra, such as bistort, which is a small plant in the Polygonaceae family, Polygonaceae, the dock family of docks, relatives of rhubarbs and such, and these provide both edible greens and seeds that could be eaten. Those plants were there, and many of these plants are now still eaten by native peoples of in northern Alaska or Siberia. The Aleuts, Eskimos still eat these in the summertime. Crowberries, roots of various herbs such as cinquefoils, potentillas were very important with coastal native tribes as food. The starchy roots were cooked and boiled and taste a bit like sweet potatoes. We have evidence that in some of these early non-treat environments we had so lots of horsetails, which when they're young make edible greens, and abundant evidence of ferns as well. And many ferns are in fact edible. The little green fiddleheads, when they first come out in the spring, that look like a coiled violin tip where the leaves are coiled up, these can be harvested and are edible. Plants, of course, can be used in a variety of ways. A is medicinal plants. They could be used for food. And for example, cow parsnip is a plant for which we find evidence from fossil pollen, and we found their fossil seeds. And cow parsnip looks like a giant parsley plant that has these huge stems that look like celery, and they're well known. All the modern ethnobotanical evidence suggests that these cow parsnip stems and early greens were highly prized by all native groups and harvested and eaten much like celery or other crunchy fresh green vegetables. And we have lots of evidence that these plants were present during this interval, so they would have been heavily used. There are many plants like the grasses and the sedges which show up in the fossil pollen record as being probably the predominant landscape elements. When you don't have the trees, maybe you have some willow shrubs, but the dominant vegetation would probably be grass-like plants or graminoids, sedges and grasses and rushes. And many of these produce, of course, very tough fiber-like plants, and the fibers from those could have been used for making ropes or bark or clothing or fishing lines or nets. There are a number of fiber plants that certainly could have been used for technology. Now, there's not much evidence of wood, and at present day we sort of associate West Coast Indian technology with things like red cedar use, where this wood, which is very soft and easily worked, would be split and used, hollowed out for, or made into boxes, bowls, implements, clothing from the bark. But since there was no woody vegetation around except for maybe some willow shrubs, wood would be a relatively rare commodity as far as we know. Maybe some driftwood that is older from older times might still be available, but essentially wood would be a rare commodity. But these plants would produce both fiber, food, and medicines, and together with probably the predominantly marine sources of food from shellfish, fish, sea mammals, and so forth, these plants, I think, would have been an important addition to their diet and their technology.